Howdy, hot shots. It's the Dividend Daddy, your favorite, not a financial advisor with not financial advice. I did a video yesterday saying that Ulti said bye to Bitcoin. Okay, they got rid of some of their Bitcoin holdings. They got rid of MSTY, so they don't have any MicroStrategy strategy exposure in Ulti right now. Well, maybe they do today, but yesterday they didn't. They didn't have any Mara. And I thought that was a good thing. And there's some people down below that don't think that's a good thing at all. But I have multiple reasons for thinking that. We've talked about how a covered call strategy fund caps the upside, but it participates in a lot of the downside, down to wherever their protective puts are. Then if they want to continue earning premium, they're going to have to roll those covered calls down closer to the current stock price, further capping the upside. So there can be losses that you can't recoup. Bitcoin has been so volatile lately that any assets associated with it move up and down greatly. Now you need that volatility in order to get the big premiums that you need in order to pay out a distribution rate of 90% like Ulti has been paying. But still, sometimes things can be too volatile and not make up for that premium that you're getting in the volatility. And that's what I have seen in my MSTY holdings, in my Ulti holding. That's what I've seen. So something that is a little more predictable, something where they can get some sort of an edge, where they have some knowledge base of where the price is going to be beneficial when you're trying to pick which stocks to have in the fund in order to get a little bit of growth, a lot of premium, and limited downside. At least that's my opinion. Now, if you're going to make the bet, you got to do the vet, but there's plenty of ways to get Bitcoin exposure if that's what you want. You don't have to have all of your money in Ulti. And so that's one of the things that makes me think maybe Ulti doesn't need that Bitcoin exposure. In fact, I would be perfectly fine if Ulti was a fund full of novel holdings that weren't in any other fund that YieldMax or Roundhill or Rex were offering. There's no reason why you can't go out and buy multiple funds in order to get the exposure that you want. In fact, I think that's preferable. Sure, it's nice to have one big wrapper, which you can do with some funds, but if you've got individual funds that have exposure to individual equities, why would you need to then double up on that exposure in a more diversified fund? Maybe Ulti should be focused on somewhat undiscovered high volatility options. You know, something that isn't as large. Maybe they should get into a little bit of the smaller cap and mid cap type stuff instead of focusing on these gigantic companies that everybody else is already involved in as well. I wouldn't mind seeing some of those smaller cap things in Ulti in smaller holdings, maybe have even more holdings, but have some things that you're not getting exposure to elsewhere. I already have YMAG, right? That's like the Magnificent Seven. I don't need to now have a duplicate of those holdings in Ulti. In fact, if I want exposure to everything that YieldMax is doing, I can just buy YMAX. I've got my little flowery notebook here that Gag got me. And let's dig in here and see what we see. Right now, YMAX has got a 44.91% distribution rate, okay? That's a pretty good distribution rate to get exposure to everything that YieldMax is doing. Now, you're paying a little bit higher fee for that, and if you have enough money to diversify amongst the funds yourself, you could essentially do that without paying that additional fee for the wrapper. But as far as Bitcoin exposure goes, people are like, well, I want the Bitcoin exposure. And I do too. I have a crypto account. It's been down the last couple days, but it's got some Bitcoin in it. All right. My favorite is XRP, although Bitcoin's obviously the granddaddy. I do believe that Bitcoin's going to go up in value. I do believe that XRP is going to go up in value. So I do like crypto, and I'm not trying to say that Ulti shouldn't have Bitcoin exposure because I don't think Bitcoin has a big future. It's just the volatility has been a little bit rough for us And I don't know that the premiums that you're getting have made up for it. Maybe they have, though. Maybe somebody out there is tracking the individual trades and said, nope, even though it's been volatile, it's more than made up for it in premium. If that's the case, then I can stand corrected. But the reality of the situation is there's several funds out there with Bitcoin exposure already. So I looked up a few of them so that we could see what our options were. If you have $10,000 in Ulti, but you go, well, I want 10% of their portfolio to be Bitcoin. Well, there's nothing stopping you from selling off $1,000 worth of that Ulti or taking your distributions for the next few weeks and then putting them in something other than Ulti. Shut off your drip. Take your distributions and reinvest it into one of these funds if you're looking for that exposure, and then you've diversified yourself and you weren't counting on Ulti to get that Bitcoin exposure for you. So as far as Bitcoin exposure goes, we've got the Global X Bitcoin covered call ETF, which is BCCC. That's got a 6.78% distribution rate, which doesn't seem that high, but maybe they're leaving room for appreciation. The Roundhill Bitcoin covered call ETF is got a distribution rate of 56.89%, so that's getting up there. Grayscale is 21.04% on BTCC, and then YieldMax has YBit, which is 71.66% distribution rate. And so that's also something to question. If they've got Bitcoin covered call ETFs, and they're only able to achieve a 71.66% distribution rate, but Ulti has a 90% distribution rate, where is that other 19% coming from? Is it coming out of your NAV, or are they making up for it with higher returns on other holdings? If what they're doing is making up for it on higher volatility stocks, well, why bring the Bitcoin into it anyway to bring that average down? Do more of the higher volatility stuff and get even more income from premiums to distribute. If they're digging into your NAV to give it back to you, well, then you could have just invested in YBIT or YBIT to begin with, gotten the 71.66% and left the rest in your NAV, because you don't really want to spend, most people don't want to spend their principal balance. They want to get the income and spend that. So when they're giving it back to you and pretending that it is part of the distribution rate, that's not ideal, okay? It's not the worst thing in the world because you still have the money, but it would be ideal if all of the money that you're getting is actually money that they've earned. MicroStrategy, they took that out of Ulti, and maybe people want that back, but the reality is if you want exposure to MicroStrategy, you can be in the Rex MicroStrategy fund, MSTY, with a distribution rate of 23.26%. Or you can be in the Roundhill, MSTW, which is supposed to be geared towards growth and income off MicroStrategy and is paying out 57.82% right now. Or you could go with YieldMax and MSTY, which is what I have, which is paying out a 90.88% distribution. But why do I need MSTY and then also need MicroStrategy and Ulti? I don't think I do. And so because there's a product available, it's not like it's hard or super expensive to get that exposure. If I thought Ulti should have 5% in MicroStrategy, I could just take 5% of my money and then buy MSTY with it. So the people that think that you're allowed to have your own opinions. I'm not trying to say that you're wrong. I'm just saying from my perspective, there's no reason to have MicroStrategy in Ulti when we have MSTY available to us right down the road. Like we could just go over there and buy a few shares of MSTY. If I think I want MicroStrategy exposure, I don't need it in Ulti because there's other options available. And then the Coinbase. Coinbase was in Ulti. But then we've got Coney in CONY, which has a 151% distribution rate. Or the COII from Rex Shares that has 27.5% distribution rate. So if I want Coinbase exposure, there's already a fund in the same fund family that's paying an astronomical yield that I can move a little bit of my money over to, or buy extra shares in, or take my distribution and go and buy. So I'm not 100% certain why we need that kind of doubling up of exposure in multiple funds. If you do want it to, if you just want exposure to all of these different things that YieldMax is doing, that's what YMax is for. And they've got a wrapper that is wrapping all of their funds in it. That's that 44%, 44.91% yield that I was talking about earlier. And they've got Coney, they've got Maro, which is a Mara covered call ETF. They've got MSTY for MicroStrategy, and they've got YBit for Bitcoin. So it's really easy for you to diversify and get exposure to the things that are getting doubled up in Ulti. And I'm not 100% sure what the benefit is there. If somebody does have some sort of a benefit that I'm missing, let me know down below. But I would prefer all unique stocks that don't have individual covered call funds available in YieldMax's fund family. I would prefer to have all different stocks in Ulti, because if I want one of the stocks that they're doing a fund on, I'll just go buy that fund. All right, D-Gens?